And so when we think about fear, what we have to understand is fear is a combination of a couple of different factors. This is the work that Andrew Huberman and I did early on when we were studying fear together. And in fact, a lot of the concepts of the book is stuff that we worked on together. But one of the things we discovered was that fear is simply a combination of two elements. Those elements are uncertainty plus anxiety, okay? In other words, you can have one of those elements and not the other, and you don't necessarily have fear. In other words, you can be anxious but not uncertain. That could be I'm giving a presentation next week at work. I know the presentation, I know the people I'm giving it to, so there's no uncertainty there, but I'm a little anxious about doing it. There's no fear, it's just some anxiety. You can be uncertain without being anxious. Okay, well, that's every kid on Christmas Eve, okay? We know there's no fear there. It's when we have those two things combined that we start to generate fear, and this is the uncertainty we're talking about. So in the context of your question, the way to mitigate that fear is to buy down either one or both of those factors. You buy down uncertainty, you buy down anxiety. Now, buying down uncertainty, the way you do that is you start picking horizons, okay? To buy down anxiety, you have to start taking charge of your physiology. In other words, when we begin to get anxious, our autonomic arousal goes up. Oftentimes, our amygdala gets tickled, and we start entering that fight or flight. What's also happening is our frontal lobe, the decision-making part of our brain, it's starting to take a back seat to our limbic brain, our lizard brain. In other words, our limbic brain is starting to move forward. In the most extreme cases of amygdala hijack and autonomic overload, this is when our frontal lobe has taken a full back seat and now we're acting without thinking, okay? This comes in very handy for things like getting out of the way of a moving train or running from the bear. But for 99% of the things in our lives, it's actually better to have our frontal lobe engaged. All right, we know that when this happens, when our autonomic arousal goes up, there are certain physiological responses that our body engages in. One of these is our vision tunnels, okay? Our vision narrows, we get tunnel vision. We also know our respiratory system, our breathing increases, it gets more rapid and more short. We take shorter, more rapid breaths. We can manipulate our physiology by acting on those factors independently. So in other words, when we choose to stop and take 10 breaths, we are in fact manipulating our respiratory system and in fact reversing that autonomic arousal process. We're bringing our autonomic arousal down. In doing so, we're bringing our frontal lobe back online and able to make conscious decisions. So all this to say, to be able to effectively pick horizons, we're doing that with our frontal lobe, our conscious decision-making part of our brain. If we feel like we're in a moment where we're actually starting to, quote, freak out or panic, first thing we want to do is bring down our anxiety. And this is what we're talking about. Take 10 deep breaths. There's several different breathing techniques we could talk about. And I outlined some in the book and some visual ones too. But we're bringing down our autonomic arousal, bring our frontal lobe back online so that we can then engage in the process. But even saying, I'm going to take 10 deep breaths, that's a horizon. And that's good enough.
Yeah, the power of breath to be able to calm you down, to be more present, just to, make such a massive difference, doesn't it?
Yeah.